Okie dokie, we are back, room 301, and today we're talking all things marketing for e-commerce. And I've got two very, very lovely colleagues of mine, one from the SEO side of things and one from the web development stroke technical side of things. So hopefully we can get sort of two differing opinions, or at least two different on this subject. So let me introduce you to our guests. So first of all, we have Helen. Helen's from our SEO team. If you want to give yourself a very quick intro, Helen, a bit of background.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Helen Halfpenny. I work on the SEO team at the Digital Maze. So I'm an SEO strategist. So that means I take some of the bigger accounts and look at the overall sort of bigger picture of what the SEO strategy will look like for them. I do some of the sort of hands-on SEO work as well. So I've got over 10 years. I don't even know how many years experience I've got now. It's quite 10 years plus experience in the world of SEO, both agency side and in-house. So I'm quite broad in terms of my experience and remit. I do a bit of everything as far as SEO goes, really. So yes,
Brilliant.
that's me.
Lovely, thank you. Mr.
Yes,
Nelson.
so I'm the technical guy at the Digital Maze. I look after the design team and the development team across all of the web projects that we take under at the Digital Maze, and usually quite a lot of time working with Helen and Helen's team, as well as the PPC team, to make sure that we are hitting all of the right metrics on the web builds that we produce and for our existing clients that we always update.
Lovely job. Thank you both. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through a series of questions, not really questions, more just posing some thoughts to you guys. And what we'd like to do is get the opinion from a technical guy and the opinion from somebody who spends their time in the weeds of SEO and SEO strategy. And then we'll finish off at the end what we're calling the Room 301 challenge. And we'll delve into that as we get through, but it's definitely worth sticking around for that one. So the first thought, what I'm going to pose to you guys, it's been a whirlwind past year in digital marketing. In fact, it's been a whirlwind past 5 years in digital marketing. I would say Google updates, AI updates, consent and cookie changes, so on and so forth. What do you think poses the biggest challenge from a marketing and a technology perspective in 2024 and beyond? I'm going to start with you, Helen.
Okay, so it's been a doubly whirlwind year for me because I've only been back at work 3 months after maternity leave, so I've had to get
quite a lot of changes.
Yeah, up to speed on quite a lot of things in the last 2 or 3 months. So it's been an extra whirlwind for me. So I guess for me, the biggest one, as you know, in SEO is Google algorithm updates and SERP updates. So just things constantly changing, the goalposts moving, sometimes daily, sometimes it feels like hourly, and having to keep up with all of that for a huge variety of different clients, different products, different sectors. I think that I don't know how small businesses doing this sort of thing themselves, I don't know how they deal with it. It's so hard to know where to focus your efforts, because something that worked one day or 1 week won't work again. So you have to constantly stay on top of everything that's changing, and the constant shifting around, the constant changes in the formats of the search engine results pages. There's just it's such a huge thing to get your head around, both as a marketer and as a small business or any kind of business owner, I imagine. So I think that is a huge challenge, and I spend my entire life trying to please Google. So it's just, it's never ending, basically, and I think that's the biggest challenge. You can just keep going and keep going, and what it might not even work. You could be doing all the right things and it might not even work, because Google's decided that another site is doing it better, even though you can't see what they're doing differently. So yeah, for me that is a huge challenge, for, I think, for e-commerce and for marketing as a whole. E-commerce, you've got the added complexity of all the products and shopping and ads and everything as well. So it's just vast. It's just absolutely vast, and it's only going to get bigger.
What's your take on how SGE, so Search Generative Experience at Google, is maybe rolling out, maybe not rolling out, and what impact that might have on e-commerce in particular?
It's hard to say because it's such a maybe, but it's obviously going to change behavior in the sense that people might not click through to sites quite as much if they're seeing what they need to see in the search engines. They might not even bother clicking through to sites. From an e-commerce perspective, I haven't really looked into it, and I haven't really kind of thought about how that might that from a sort of sales and product perspective. I haven't really sort of had a chance to think how that might affect things, but certainly from a traffic perspective, it potentially cause headaches for websites and how they optimize for that type of search as well. I think it's gonna change user behavior or potentially change user behavior quite markedly, but it remains to be seen to what extent, I guess.
Yeah, no, user behavior is definitely a word that gets used regularly from the conversations I'm having, and I'm sure Liam is probably about to use it as well. So, from a technical standpoint, Liam, what challenges do you think are going to be the biggest ones from an e-commerce perspective in this year and going forward?
I think I'm going to start with AI. I always talk about AI, and I bet people are sick of hearing me talk about AI. But I think there was a couple of interesting things that have happened over the past week with it. Obviously, me and you were on a pitch the other day, and we asked the client, obviously, how did you find us? Thinking, Google search or recommendation or something like that. And she said ChatGPT. She'd gone to ChatGPT, probably used some kind of plugin or extension, and asked it to give her a list of mid-sized agencies that can help her with e-commerce sites. And I was just like, oh, that's different.
This is where you take credit, Helen.
Yeah, that's it. So obviously,
that was me.
The work we've done on our own site has found its way into that algorithm. But I think that's one of those things where AI was a big thing early last year. That's where the kind of like the big bang happened. Lots of promises were made, lots of products existed, and 95% of them were just rubbish. But there are lots of useful tools out there. And I think over the next 12 to 18 months, the rubbish tools will disappear and we'll start having some really useful things. And I think it will have a knock-on effect. So in our world, in agency and tech land, we use AI all the time for the right things and the right tools. But I think your average non-techie, non-agency person knows about this AI thing. They might use ChatGPT to help them, write a bit of content or answer a few questions. But I think in 12, 18 months, that's when the normal user of the world will start actually using AI. And I think that's when we'll see the user behavior change and more people looking in ChatGPT and Gemini and all of the other tools that come out to help them find things, browse things, get recommendations for holidays, flights, so on and so forth. So I think it's definitely something that will start rolling out. I think in the world of e-commerce, Shopify are doing a lot of stuff with AI in terms of like chatbots and product recommendation engines and things like that. I think that's where you'll end up going to an e-commerce site and start asking it questions about what you want. What have we got this in size? This is the kind of thing I'm looking for. That'll probably get rolled out to the open source frameworks. Things like WooCommerce will have even more plugins and extensions for different pieces like that. to help the user and the user experience. And then on the other side, so in the tech land, there'll be lots of tools to help us build sites quicker and better. But the difficult thing with all of this is you can have a tool which helps you out on the development side, but it could create really bad markup, really bad technical foundations. So you have a really good, well-working website, but the Google crawler just can't read it, can't find what it wants, it can't figure out what you're doing. So that's why agencies like us, we need to speak amongst teams and make sure we've got the SEO team checking the development homework, make sure we've got the PPC team looking over to make sure that the tracking's all set up properly. So it will be definitely a much more collaborative effort, especially for agencies and in-house teams over the next 12 to 18 months to make sure that one team's not going off on a tangent and doing all this crazy stuff with all these tools and just, behind the scenes causing absolute carnage. So yeah, that's my summary on AI, I think, in this space and where we're at right now. Can I move on to my other point? Yeah, there we go. So I think we spoke about this on the last podcast, but it's contradicting everything I said with Google Consent Mode V2. And if nobody knows what this is, Google have said, unless you specifically don't track a user from like Google Tag Manager perspective or any Google ad tracking perspective, the user has to explicitly consent to those cookies for you to even load those tags on the page. So what we know is a lot of users, when that cookie banner appears on a website, they just leave it there and they just carry on browsing. And so if you enable Google Consent Mode V2, you won't be able to see what those users are doing, what pages are visiting, are they adding products to your basket, are they checking out, are they coming back to you, what devices are they using. Agencies, marketers are just going to be blind to all of that data. So what's going to happen is when all sites and e-commerce sites have to get on board with this, the first thing a user is going to be greeted with before they can do anything is a horrible looking pop-up which says, please accept cookies. And then there'll be some tiny writing to say more options where you'll get the rejection notice. So effectively, this is just going to make the user experience on a website really bad. I don't think there's anything we can do about it. It's just what Google says. It's obviously legislation in the EU, in America, and probably coming to the UK soon. I think there is a slight loophole at the minute where if you're in the UK, it doesn't technically count because we're not in the EU, but it'll definitely be coming. And it's just going to make people, just going to be that really annoying thing when you first go onto a website, you have to click a button before you can see anything. And without that, you just won't have any visibility on your Google ad performance, your site performance. And yeah, it's just annoying, really. There you go. That's it. Mini rant over.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing that a lot. I can't claim to know a huge amount about it, but I think outside of the realms of digital marketing and agency land like us, it's probably not that widely known that these changes are coming down the line as well. What I took from, I think, both of your answers there was what to focus on is probably going to be the biggest challenge. There's so many changes. It's, how do we stay ahead of the curve? And as Liam said, when the mere mortals of this world get their hand on the AI tools, and it becomes more and more widely adopted, they're going to have an expectation that these things are going to be live and direct on different websites. So it's picking the ones that we should do to stay ahead of the curve, and that's challenging. Which one should we pick? What's going to give us the best advantage? Time is money, especially in our game, and we have to spend our time on the right things. And sometimes it feels like we're putting our finger in the air in terms of, we'll try this one, but it comes at the cost of time. So yeah, if anything, for me, what I took from that is focus, and where to focus time and attention in any marketing strategy is going to be the biggest challenge, just because there's, and you can think of it quite positively, there's so many different things you could do, great, but actually it's, if you haven't got an unlimited budget like the, Fortune 500 companies have, and you're a small business like you mentioned, Helen, it's very difficult to pinpoint where the best advantage is going to come. So, and
even then, you can do everything, and then you're doing too much. You're almost doing too much. What's working, what's not working, kind of thing. What's driving the changes? So, yeah, it's so hard.
I think all you can do, and I think the advantage we've got in that situation is because we've got such a wide variety of clients and from different sectors and different industries, we can take our experience and learnings from one client to another, and I think that gives us a quite a clear advantage there, which is really quite useful. If we see something working over here, there's a good chance that we can save time for another customer and cut some corners for them by implementing a similar sort of strategy. So I suppose that's how we would overcome that sort of challenge. Thank you for that. So the next, I suppose, thought I'm going to put out there is, the overlap between SEO and development teams in a full stack agency, which is what we are. What insights from one another's teams have you gathered, I suppose, over the last few years? And I know, Helen, you've only been back here for sort of 3 months after your maternity leave, but what have you learned, and how has that reshaped your approach in a marketing strategy or a technical strategy from your standpoint, Liam? Helen?
Well, for me, like you say, I'm only just back, but I mean, I haven't actually worked on too many full projects with our internal dev team, just because of the clients that I've worked with. But so I'm currently working on my first one.
Okay.
So I think that the key thing is obviously it's communication, and it's knowing how to communicate between the different teams. So knowing what the developers need to know, because I'm looking at it from an SEO perspective. I know what I want. I know what the client needs, but what does that look like from a development point of view? What does the developer need to know? And how can I make it as clear as possible what needs to be done, so that it's easy for the developer to implement, and the client gets what they need. So it's just having that constant line of communication between the two teams, and making sure that, and using things like Slack to make sure that everyone's got access to the same information, sort of things like card sorting exercises, site maps, redirect maps, that kind of thing. So I think that obviously it's very I'd say a lot more process driven on the development side of things than it potentially is on the SEO side of things. Obviously we have our different ways of working. So it's, I think for me, it's kind of how do we align the different ways of working, and communication is absolutely just key to that.
Yeah, and for me, it's balancing as well, because obviously different priorities in different teams. A development or a design team, both in the same team in our business for sure, but they're focused on the visuals and different focuses, whereas the SEO team is very much focused on probably structure and how do we make sure that when it does launch, we don't either see a drop or actually we see a benefit from that, and it's balanced in who drives what, in my opinion.
This is it. So for example, like earlier in the week, I had a document through from our client services team who'd been talking to the developers regarding one of my clients about some changes being made to their website, and there was just SEO sort of was factored in, but I could bring in a whole load of different other things, and I probably muddied the waters completely by saying we need to think about this, we need to think about this, we need to think about this. But it's having that ahead of time whilst the discussions are being had, making sure that everyone's feeding in, so everything is taken into consideration, because too many times in my experience, both in-house and agency side, one team or the other team has been brought in far too late, and it's difficult to change things once that happens, but it's also easy for that to happen. So certainly, in previous roles where I've found that either SEO hasn't considered development, or development hasn't considered SEO. But I think because of the way we work now, it is a lot easier to be a lot more aligned, and we do have those lines of communication within the teams, and it definitely works a lot.
Yeah, a lot of trial and error, and I think certainly in e-commerce, it's so important that if you're going to rebuild a site or relaunch a site or even make changes to a site, that both teams have the right level of input, because most e-commerce sites are, the revenue is generated by organic and paid, and if one of those channels, sees a drop for whatever reason, it can have a massive impact on the business. So it's really, really crucial that the two teams are driving the right bits of the project, should we say. What about your standpoint, Liam, in terms of what have you seen that's, I suppose, reshaped your approach or your team's
I
approach?
think like we've looked at this quite a lot over the past 3-4 years, because I think definitely say like 5-6 years ago, I think it was important, but it was less important that SEO teams needed to speak to development teams. I think the landscape of SEO was easier. Like a few years ago, I don't know how many algorithm updates and changes have been made over the last 2 years. It's insane. So like they were a lot less frequent back in the day, and there was a bit less reliance on SEO and development teams to be kind of so closely knit and sharing knowledge. I think so if we take a web project, so let's just say we're rebuilding a site for one of our SEO clients, like the person I feel most sorry for is the project manager in that situation, because she has to coordinate the client expectations because they want a nice new shiny all singing all dancing website. You've got the SEO team that want to mitigate as much risk as possible for that site launch, which usually involves let's make as few changes as possible. And then you've got the design teams who want to create a lovely creative site to the client brief. And then you've got the development team that want a nice, easy life and just write the code that they want to write and launch the site. So the project manager is arguably the most important person in that whole process. They have to coordinate, manage 4-5 different sets of people's expectations, and just line everything up, because there's two things that need to happen. One, like Helen said, you need to be meeting and speaking upfront. So like SEO, we do it. So the SEO team say, all right, these are non-negotiables. Please don't change this. Please keep the URLs as close to what they are. Please make sure that we copy over all the content and things like that. And then just carry that through really. So regular checkpoints, regular meetings. When we've done the design, send it to the SEO team before we send it to the client and get their feedback. When the client sends feedback in, that might go against what's going to be good for them from an SEO perspective. So again, let's educate the client on why that's not a good thing to do. And yeah, like Helen said, it's just the communication throughout the project, because if the design gets signed off and we go through the build and we're about to launch and we say, hey, Helen, site's ready to go, can you just check it over for us? That's usually when lots of things go wrong. So yeah, it's all about just touching base frequently and making sure that we've mitigated as much risk as possible. And I think the other thing which could get overlooked is it's not just about launching that site and then kind of like from the dev team's perspective, just right, that's it, we're done. It's about monitoring how it drops, how it's launched, what changes do we need to make, kind of like a bit of an all hands on deck approach post launch, just to make sure that anything that we thought was right but hasn't quite landed gets corrected pretty quickly, and we just keep on monitoring that over the next weeks and early months.
No, I agree. I agree with all of that, and I think, as you sort of alluded to there, Liam, 4 or 5 years ago, SEO was, well, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, it's even the UX and how long people are spending on websites, how many pages they're visiting, are they engaged, are they enjoying the look of the website? Even that is part of the SEO matrix.
It's all interlinked massively now.
It's all interlinked, whereas going back a few years back, it was more around the structure side of it. But now it's everything. It's structure, engagement, where the content is, how far up the page, how far down the page. There's so much to consider now. And it's part and parcel of why we've built the agency that we are. It's full service. I think you have to have the two different skill sets involved in an SEO strategy for it to work successfully. And I really fully believe that. And I think if you haven't got that, you're going to find challenges and you're going to be butting heads with other developers from external agencies and so on and so forth. So, no, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything you said. Just keeping on the sort of theme of e-commerce and development, there's obviously lots of different platforms out there, and I think all those different platforms pose advantages and disadvantages for both SEOs, but also developers as well, and the customer. So again, what platform? I suppose does the platform even make a difference? Does it make a difference from an SEO perspective?
I mean, it can do. Certain different platforms offer different functionalities, different limitations. So they work in different ways. So, for example, things like Shopify, you can't edit the robots.txt files. So it makes it difficult to easily direct which parts of the site that you want Google to crawl. So from an SEO perspective, you might see pages appearing in the index that you don't want to, if you've got a Shopify site potentially. But I think, that there's obviously SEO is a huge part of it all. So by and large, the platforms make it relatively easy to update the basics of the site. So WordPress is obviously a very user-friendly platform, and it's from an SEO perspective and a sort of business perspective as well. My experience personally is primarily with WordPress websites. I've not really dealt with many Shopify or Adobe Commerce sites or anything. I'm trying to think of any that I've had to deal with in the past. So primarily, my experience is WordPress and WooCommerce, which is obviously a good platform from an SEO perspective and a user perspective. But yes, it certainly can make a difference, I think, in terms of like what functionalities are available to you when you're using that platform.
Are there any platforms that keep you up at night? If I was to go, Helen, new client for you, e-commerce client, great business, and they're on platform.
Oh, that's a trick. I don't know, because, like I say, I've primarily dealt with WordPress clients. I think it's probably changed a lot, but a few years ago I had a Drupal client,
Drupal,
and that was interesting to update. But I mean, we're going back several years now, and I'm sure it's a lot different.
Now, Liam's shaking his head. I think he agrees.
Oh. But yeah, that one was, whenever I had to make updates for that particular site, I was like, oh god, what do I do? Where do I even go?
Failing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on, I suppose, e-commerce platform selection?
It's usually my job, isn't it? Yeah.
It is normally your job.
I'm usually the one with the pressure of, we've got this client, these are their requirements, or we've got this potential client, these are their requirements. What platform are we going to build their site on? And in the e-commerce world, you've got to have a very good reason not to go with WooCommerce or Shopify, in my opinion. Some people may disagree. They're the two platforms that have the highest market share. Obviously, it did used to be a bit of a battle with WooCommerce and Magento back in the day. Magento was seen as the more grown-up framework. WooCommerce was the more kind of cheaper option. But now, kind of like Magento has gone down a lot in the market share, been snapped up by Shopify, which has grown massively over the past 2-3 years. So really, in terms of e-commerce frameworks now, it's Shopify or WooCommerce. And there's quite a lot of factors that I think need to be considered, even outside of SEO, in terms of what platform you go on. Both are great platforms for different reasons. Like Shopify is quite a closed system, meaning that a lot of the core code is cut off from developers and can only be accessed in certain ways, which has its benefits, but it also has its disadvantages. Whereas WooCommerce is the complete opposite. You can, from a development perspective, you can do whatever you want with that. So I suppose in kind of like more basic terms, if you need a lot of customizations and you've got quite a lot of integrations, you probably can still do them in Shopify, but it's going to be a lot more expensive for you. Whereas in WooCommerce, typically those sites with different customizations that are required will be cheaper. And in terms of quality and performance, not much difference between the two. If we throw in kind of like SEO considerations into the mix, it's always best, I think, to look at what platform you're on at the minute. So if you're already on WooCommerce, but you just, a bit sick and tired of how it's been tinkered with over the past 8 years and you can't update things anymore, which is something we get all the time. Unless there's a really good reason, I would always say stick with WooCommerce, because one thing, if you're doing that, if you're going from WooCommerce to Shopify, you are going to be completely restructuring all of your URLs, which I know is not always an advisable thing from an SEO standpoint, unless you really have to do it. And that is probably, from an SEO point of view with Shopify, it's probably one of the biggest downsides right now is you are limited on how you can structure your categories or collections. You can't really tinker too much with the URL structure, but you can still have a site on Shopify and it still can rank really well. And a lot of that is down to how the technical setup of Shopify is created. Big benefit of Shopify is you'll have to do a really bad build on Shopify to have it perform poorly from a speed and performance point of view. They generally do perform really well from that standpoint. Whereas WooCommerce, if you build it in the wrong way with lots of plugins and lots of kind of code bloat, it can perform pretty poorly. So that's always something to keep an eye on. So my short answer, Rob, is it's a common phrase in the world of SEO. It depends. It depends on what your requirements are.
No, I agree, and I think what I've taken there is moving from one platform to another. There should be more consideration than just wanting to do it because this platform looks shiny. I think there has to be a real justification behind that, because the changes that you make do expose you to potentially some big issues down the line if not done correctly. Very confident, we know what we're doing. But again, where we can, we'd advise a customer to stay where they are unless it's a massive justification.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time we get clients recently now saying they'll come to us and they'll say, I want a e-commerce site on Shopify, because they've heard about Shopify and it's a nice new shiny thing. I can think about 3 or 4 over the past 6 months. And then when we ask the question, why, they're like, I don't know, I just heard it's good. And then when you ask what the requirements are, it's like, this Shopify is just not going to work for you. I think the reason Shopify has grown is because it was a great entry level startup platform, and obviously throughout the COVID period, everyone was thinking, how can I start selling things online? And it's captured all of those users and it's improved its platform as the years have gone on. But yeah, you do really need to think about what framework you want to move to, either if you've not got a website and you want to start up, or if you've got an existing website and you want to change it for whatever reason. But that is where we can help.
Little plug there. I mean, on plugs, I should say there's lots of resources on our website all around e-commerce frameworks, platforms, recommendations, reasons why, justifications why you should choose one platform over another. And also, just rewinding probably 15 minutes ago, we talked about consent mode. And I know this episode is not focused on that, but it is a significant thing in the world of digital marketing at the minute. And there's actually a really good article on our website written by our head of PPC Arena, all about consent mode V2. That was released on the 18th of March. That's one of the later blogs on our site. So I really recommend reading that if you're interested in delving into that in more detail. So, moving away from platforms, but keeping on the sort of e-commerce topic, trust is a huge factor in any online venture, but particularly in e-commerce, and it's one of the things that Google really looks for now, to add a lot of weight to a website and therefore visibility to a website. So how do you build trust with customers in e-commerce from an SEO perspective?
I think it comes down to a lot of things really, but it primarily is the user experience on the site. And obviously, as we said previously, UX and SEO are more closely linked than they ever were before. So things like making sure that your pages are loading fairly quickly. People don't want to have to wait around. It provides a poor user experience for them. People browse on mobiles, so sites need to work on mobiles as well. So not having font sizes that are too small, buttons that can't be clicked, making sure that all functionality that's available on desktop sites is available on mobiles as well. And I think the look and feel is a huge thing of your website. So if you've got not decent product photos, you need to have lovely photos of your products, nice clear product descriptions that tell the customer what they need to know, and try and, if possible, try and write them yourself rather than relying on manufacturer descriptions. And making it easy for the customer to buy. So they click on your page, they can get to the category, they can get to the product, they can add it to basket. And that journey is nice and smooth. There's no bumps along the way. There's no, loops where they get stuck. And just, having clear calls to action to drive people through that journey. And then obviously from a trust perspective, security is a huge thing. So making sure your site is secure, and making sure that you're not exposing any sort of customer data, making sure that you're if possible, making it so that customers can create accounts, but also if they don't want to, that that you're offering a checkout as a guest option as well. And just there's a whole lot of things. I think everything comes down to the user experience now, and the experience that you're providing on your site. Because if that experience is poor, they're not going to trust you. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to buy from somewhere else. And it's such a huge thing now, user experience, that it's even it's part of, sorry.
Feels like the bar's really been raised in recent years.
Yeah.
So much stuff that you have to get spot on.
Yeah.
From user experience point of view, which therefore has an impact on SEO, from a structural point of view, from a design point of view, from a build point of view, from a customer account point of view, to a checkout point of view, to a basket point of view. I could go on and on and on and on. How have we sort of managed to stay ahead on that, Liam?
I think a lot of this comes down to the design of the site. So I think our design team will take a lot of credit here, and it's about making sure that they understand the client requirements, but they really understand the user of the website. So it's really important, because a lot of the time client can say, we want XYZ on this site, and we have to be like, well, why? Because your users don't want XYZ. You just want that, because you want it. So a lot of the conversations I've been having with James, who's our head of design recently, is just about there's lots of things you can put on a website for trust, but they can kind of just get in the way sometimes. So sometimes we'll just go back to basics, keep it simple. If a user wants to go to a website and find a t-shirt and buy a t-shirt, let it easy for them to find the t-shirt and buy the t-shirt. The obvious things need to be in place, like how much is the shipping going to cost me? What do other people think about this? What's the fit like on the t-shirt? So all those kind of things that we need to get across to the user. But let's just not bombard them with loads of different things that they don't necessarily need. So I think a lot of the time from a design perspective, it's about having those things in place and having them in the right way at the right point of the journey, which is something that I think definitely our design team do quite well. And then again, it's like the when we're launching a website, like I was talking about from the SEO standpoint, once it's launched, we're monitoring this stuff. Like, is this actually working? We have got a couple of AI tools that can mark our homework from a design point of view, but users will do what users want. I remember when we were researching all the Consent V2 stuff, and I was like, so how many people don't actually click allow cookies? And it's a lot. It's like so many users just leave that little annoying thing chilling at the bottom of the site. So yeah, I think once we have launch sites, it's really important to monitor how the conversion is, how users are browsing the site, what changes need to be made, and so on.
Cool. Well, we're coming up to the 40-minute mark, so I'm going to do one more question, and then we'll move on to the Room 301 challenge. So we've spoken about it a few times. Spoke about UX and how how that's impacting SEO, and certainly over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, it's become even more and more prevalent. Is there any conflicts with that? Is there anything that an SEO might recommend that certainly would conflict with a UX expert?
Yeah.
Leo's on his head. Go on, Elvin.
And again, I'm gonna caveat this by saying more so in years ago. Obviously, it's the balance of if you're in SEO, you want to put as much content on the page as possible, because that's what Google used to like, and Google still does like. But the more content you put on a page, users don't really read stuff these days. So you might be putting that content at the top of a product category page, but then you're moving everything down. So like moving those t-shirts down the page on that product category. So it is about having conversations with the SEO team and the client, and working out, if we do this, like what perfect looks like is we have 2 paragraphs at the top of this product category page, and we can have some more towards the bottom. We think, based on other sites that we've done, this is going to work well, but just so you know, it might not. And in 3 months' time, we might be adding more content to the top, and we'll revisit it. So I think that's the obvious one that springs to my mind. And I suppose the other one is, from a technical standpoint, and Core Web Vitals and Lighthouse and stuff, just like the algorithm updates, Google moved the goalposts on those, the criteria, what we need to meet, what we need to do every single week, and it just gets harder and harder and harder and harder. So I know not all of the time we can get the perfect 100 out of 100 across the board, but again, it's about kind of speaking to the SEO team and saying, like, this is what we've done, this is what we can do. If we push it a bit further, it's probably going to take us 4 weeks and might not be worth the ROI, but we can still give it a go. So yeah, I think that they're the 2 things that spring to my mind.
Anything you want to add to that, Helen?
No, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. To be honest, yes, I completely understand the whole sort of huge amounts of content thing, and that's been a frustration of mine in the past, because who is reading it, and you spend hours perfecting the absolutely perfect optimized copy, and actually when you get it on the site, it doesn't look great. It leads to a page that doesn't look great because of the way the page template's built, or you're trying to fit it into a page template that it doesn't really fit with. So yes, I think it can create a poor user experience, but it is what Google has wanted in the past. We're seeing it sort of not quite as much these days. You don't need to have a huge word count to rank. It obviously depends on what the purpose of the page is, what the intent is behind the search queries and such like. But yes, I'm certainly seeing a lot most of e-commerce sites with fairly limited text content on the page, and then they are more focused actually on the visuals of the product and providing a better kind of visual user experience rather than the paragraphs of text, and they're still ranking reasonably well. So yeah,
I mean, to be fair, it's not for today. We could probably talk about this all day, but I've heard rumblings of Google looking towards a model of almost adding weight to websites with more bite-sized information, because there's obviously a trend of people's attention spans getting smaller and smaller. The TikTok generation, the 15-second video generation, and actually, Google are looking at, or potentially looking at, how do we make sure we're adding weight to those websites that do just get to the point, are focused, and therefore probably does improve the user experience. But again, not for today. Just a rumor.
We'll have to have new hidden pages for the AI to understand what the website's about that no human ever reads. In the future.
Cool. Well, look, I appreciate both your insights on some of the things I've thrown out there today. We're going to finish up with what we're calling the Room 301 challenge. So, for anybody that doesn't know, the 301 in our podcast name comes from something called a 301 redirect, which is effectively a permanent redirect of one URL to another. It's how SEOs tell the search engines that a page has moved, and the search engine should look somewhere else instead. So with that in mind, the Room 301 challenge is effectively asking you guys, the experts on the podcast, what would you redirect permanently? In other words, get rid of.
I think I know what Liam might say.
Your pet peeve in digital marketing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something else, but yeah.
Go on, Liam, you start.
I'll go with the obvious. So, I mean, not just consent mode v2, but cookie pop-ups in general. Like, do I need to read a caveat here? Like, the views are my own and not of the digital mazes. For me, I think widely, I get it. I get why there's protection over people's privacy and it is important. But for me, I would much rather, if I'm looking for a pair of trainers and I don't commit to a purchase, I would much rather there is data out there that people can use to send me trainers that I might like, as opposed to just sending me some random stuff because we don't have the data behind it. I want targeted, personalized ads because, you know, it's going to help me buy what I want or find what I want or find something that I didn't know I wanted. And all of the stuff at the minute and the way it's going is you're going to have a really annoying pop-up that it's going to be difficult for you to not use cookies. And then if you don't use cookies, the retailer on the end of that site are not going to get the data they need to understand user behavior and make their site the best that they can make it and improve the online experience for them, because they're just going to be guessing. So the whole thing and how it's been implemented is very silly in my point of view, and it's just not going to get the outcome that is wanted, because it's just going to make everybody's life harder. And end of rant before I go any further.
No, makes sense. I think that a lot of people would agree with you there, particularly in the PPC area, who directly need to show output to customers and whatnot. And any marketer has got a budget who wants to know where that money's being spent and how it's being spent. So, what are you getting rid of, Helen?
GA4. I hate it.
GA4.
Oh yeah.
I miss Universal Analytics. Oh my god.
Me too. Me too.
So I just cannot get my head around GA4. It's it was so easy in Universal Analytics to find the reports that I wanted to use and to kind of filter them how I wanted and just generally get the information I wanted out of it. And it felt like there was a lot more there as well. With GA4, I have to click about 15 times to get a report that I could get through 2 clicks in Universal Analytics, and I still don't feel like the information's completely there that I used to be able to access. I have to faff around for ages trying to get it to do what I want. And I suppose this is where sort of Looker Studio comes in, and you can tailor the reports through there. So obviously that's what we use for client reporting and things. So that takes some of the sting out of it. But seriously, I just want to go back. I just want to go back.
I feel for you guys.
GA4 back to
and you know
Universal.
why, Helen?
And
I was going to say, you know why? It's because of data.
Okay.
You know, it's because we don't have the data that we used to have.
I know it is. It's just annoying.
No, I used to be quite proficient, I would say, at Universal Analytics, and I took one. I took one look at GA4 and I thought, nah, I can't. I just can't.
I've tried.
The Looker Studio reports that the team put together are great. Like I say, it's bite-sized. It really helps with my attention span, that's for sure. Cool. Well, look, I appreciate both of your time. Thank you very much. That is the end of the episode. Hopefully there's some good insights from both an SEO's perspective and somebody who leads the technical team's perspective as well on all things e-commerce. We're the Digital Maze. You can find more information about us at thedigitalmaze.com. We try and release an episode every month, and we do webinars as well. So if you'd like to jump on and hear from us live and direct, so the next one's coming up in a few weeks with our head of design, James, talking about all things UX, which is quite topical, given what we've spoken about today on some of the questions. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again soon.